Hi, I'm Peter Giannetti, Editor-in-Chief of Homepage News. And this is Truth on Trend, a new video series that will examine the evolving connection between consumer behavior and the home and housewares industry. Each episode will explore not just the latest trends, but also the influences behind shifting trend patterns and how such information is essential to product and marketing strategy. Throughout this series, I'll be joined by Tom Mirabile, founder of Springboard Futures and trend analyst for the International Housewares Association. We'll also welcome special guests, trend experts who will share their exclusive insights and forecasts. Welcome, Tom. Let's kick off the Truth on Trend series by looking at the role of trend forecasting in such a dynamic marketplace, where consumer attitudes were so vividly redirected by the pandemic. Tom, why is this so important?
At the beginning of the pandemic, there was an editorial that you did, and it said during times of stress that businesses and uncertainty, businesses tend to fall into a sort of strategic paralysis. And I mean, I locked into that because the truth is that trend services really help keep us moving forward. They help us, that expertise helps us overcome what it is that, is keeping us stagnant.
What makes a good forecaster, Tom? I mean, whether we're talking about consumer trend forecasting, style trends, whatever, what should we be looking for?
For me, a good trend analyst is they're right. I don't know how else to say it. Good trend, I think a lot of us contract with trend companies or buy trend reports, but we don't look at the history of a trend forecaster and say, have they been right? It's make sure that they show you copies of their back issues and show you where they've been right, what they've predicted, and how those predictions relate to your business, because we're all in different businesses. A lot of industries have a history of treating trend like some mystical art that we can't quantify or qualify, and that doesn't work, because then it's always scary. It always becomes, in today's business world, if you can't become a part of these strategic or financial conversations, then you're always going to be at a backseat. You're always going to be an area of risk, and I think that's what we try to avoid. The problem is that retailers never, whether you're a retailer or a manufacturer, when a trend doesn't come out right, nobody ever blames the forecaster. Nobody ever blames the trend service. It's just instinctive to us. Oh, I must have done the wrong shade, or I must have done it at the wrong time. And that's not the case. We need to look back and say, wait a second, maybe that was just a lousy forecast.
Are there situations where trend forecasts are just not useful, Tom?
I think that when some trend forecasters or some trend services companies, they look at style, but they don't look at social or economic influences, and then others speak to lifestyle and consumer trends, and very intelligently, but they can't translate that knowledge into products, into services. And that's where the rubber meets the road. So those considerations are what tells you about a trend's durability. So if you're not looking at that, you're missing the big picture. I get irritated because forecasting is not cheap. We pay a lot, and any retailer, any manufacturer pays a tremendous amount of money on forecasters, on forecasting, on trend services and trend analysis. And so, but if they're not getting anything useful to show for it, then it's money wasted, because it happens.
Right. Well, I mean, you talk about forecasters have to understand the business. Obviously, you go in with a point of view of some sort, but at the beginning, it's really about understanding the customer and what their expectations are,
and understanding the customer's business. I think that it's, if you're working with a company, if you're working with a forecaster, even when somebody's trying to sell you a report, if they don't, trend forecasters, we don't like to ask questions. I mean, I do, but a lot of people don't like to ask questions because it makes them look like they don't understand your business. But the bottom line is they will never understand it as deeply as in the nuance that you do. So if you're working with a forecaster that's not asking you a lot of questions about your business, then you're working with a forecaster who's selling some, boilerplate, a product that may not be right for you. there are a lot of trend companies that tell you what you need, and they're focused on what you need to be, but they never stop and ask you what you want to be, because who you are today is not who you may want to be tomorrow. So trend forecasters that are great always integrate your strategic objectives into the forecast they turn over to you.
And also, it all starts with understanding the consumer. I mean, without that, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, consumer centrism is incredibly important, especially right now, because we're looking at trends that affect trends that are affected by our moods. You know, I mean, just look at color. During the pandemic, there was a real movement towards paler colors. Consumers were saying, what colors can I paint my home? What colors will be calming, or what will diffuse the tension in the home, because we're spending so much time here and there's too many of us. So you saw industry kind of move to these more muted colors, more paler mineral colors to achieve that. Well, now the pandemic's over, and like a flash, you go to market and the responsive people have brights, because that's where our heads are right now. We want to celebrate. You know, that is a consumer completely driven by, as you said, consumers. It's consumer sentiment that drives that.
But it's also, you point out, it's not enough just to know what the trend is. You need to know why and where it's headed.
Right. You know, I think we've all been in those presentations where somebody comes in and presents a report, and you and your staff, it's like shock and awe. You sit there and you're like, oh my God, that's beautiful. Or, oh, that's so inspiring. Or, oh, wow, listen to those numbers. 60% of consumers do this, or 70% of consumers do that. Well, they're not necessarily your consumers, you know, and what happens is they leave the room and you and your staff are driven by something irrelevant, or at worst, at best, you find yourself looking back and saying, I didn't use any of that, or that wasn't really actionable for me. And that's a crime, because like I said, trend's not cheap. You know, we get paid a lot of money for a lot of good reasons. You know, we just have to perform like any other part of the business.
Well, and there are different ways of measuring trend. And I think that's part of the evolution of this business right now, Tom.
Well, you know, I think one of the things, one of the things about Springboard, I mean, our objective is to look at trend from points of viability. You know, no trend happens without a history, out of social context. So we look at the aspects of trend that make it viable or not viable, and give a numeric score, so that you have a place. Trend has a place in the room when you've got top executives there who make decisions based on analytics. You know, it doesn't say that you still have to apply your model to it. But the idea about trend, whenever we're talking about trend, and I think one of the things that we've decided to explore in this series, is trend is or is not by context. If it wasn't about context, every retailer would look like, you know, the ones who differentiate themselves understand who their consumers are, understand the environment they're working in, and there are just a lot more details that have to be considered, a lot more influences that have to be.
Well, thank you, Tom. I think we're on our way to discovering the truth on trend. In the weeks ahead, we're going to bring viewers new trends, the facts that validate them, and why they are critical to the growth and progress of the home and housewares industry. You'll hear fresh perspectives, you'll meet renowned experts, and finally, the curtains will be pushed aside to reveal the truth on trend. For Tom Mirabile of Springboard Futures, I'm Peter Giannetti of Homepage News. We'll see you next time on Truth on Trend.